By sunrise, the man I saved had bought the building. And that was the moment I understood some strangers don't leave your life quietly. I was standing on the sidewalk outside Bennett Community Clinic at 7:12 on a Thursday morning, still holding my coffee, still wearing the same navy scrubs I'd slept in for maybe 2 hours, when I saw the men in black suits. There were 6 of them, spread across the front entrance like they belonged there, earpieces in, polished shoes dry despite the rain that had just stopped an hour earlier. The old green awning with peeling white letters still sagged over the door. The cracked flower pot by the steps was still cracked. But everything else felt wrong. A new black SUV idled at the curb. 2 electricians were installing cameras above the entrance. And my landlord, Mr. Conway, a man who usually looked at me like I was personally responsible for every overdue bill in his life, was standing near the door with both hands clasped in front of him like he was waiting for permission to breathe. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. One of the men opened the clinic door before I even reached it. "Morning, Miss Bennett." That stopped me cold. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer. Mr. Conway hurried toward me, rainwater darkening the shoulders of his cheap brown coat. "Claire, I was going to call you." His face was pale, almost sweaty, and his smile kept slipping at the edges. "Call me about what?" He glanced behind me, then lowered his voice. "The building was sold at 4:40 this morning." I laughed once because it didn't make sense. "What building?" He blinked. "This building." I looked up at the second-floor windows with their crooked blinds, at the faded brick, at the hand-painted sign in the glass that still said Walk NS Welcome. "You sold the building overnight?" "I didn't exactly sell it," he said, already sounding defensive. "I was made an offer." "By who?" That was when the rear passenger door of the SUV opened. The air changed before he even stepped out. Maybe that sounds dramatic, but I don't know how else to explain it. Some people carry noise with them. He carried silence. He was taller than I remembered, broad-shouldered in a charcoal coat, dark hair still slightly damp, one hand bare. Against the car door. His expression was calm, unreadable, but I knew those eyes the second they found mine. I knew the steadiness in them, the control, the dangerous kind of patience. 12 hours earlier, that same man had walked into my clinic leaving rainwater and blood on the tile, looked me straight in the face, and said, "I need a doctor who asks no questions." I should have called 911. I should have locked the door. Instead, I'd looked at the white bandage he was holding against his side, at the exhaustion he was trying hard not to show, and I'd said the dumbest thing possible. "You're in luck," I'd told him. "I'm too tired to ask anything." Now he was here in daylight, whole and composed, with 6 armed-looking men and my landlord acting like he'd just met royalty. He walked toward me slowly, like he already knew I wasn't going anywhere. "Good morning, Claire," he said. His voice was low, even, familiar in a way that made my pulse trip. "I thought your clinic deserved better walls." For a second, I just stared at him, sure I had misheard. Better walls. Like he had upgraded a waiting room, not purchased an entire 4-story building before most people in Brooklyn had poured their first cup of coffee. The paper cup in my hand went soft under my grip. "You bought my clinic?" I asked. Adrian Moretti stopped 3 feet away, close enough for me to catch the clean scent of rain and expensive wool, close enough to see that the color had returned to his face since the night before. He looked rested, untouchable, like men did not walk into his life bleeding and uncertain. Like he had not sat on my exam table while I stitched him up under flickering fluorescent lights and told him twice to stop trying to stand. "I bought the building," he said. "Your clinic is still yours." Mr. Conway gave a quick nervous nod, eager to support whatever version of reality Adrian preferred. "That is right. Existing tenants remain in place. There will be renovations, security improvements, structural repairs, all covered." I turned to my landlord. "You raised my rent 3 times in 2 years, and suddenly you care about structural repairs." "Claire," he said, voice thin, "this is a very generous arrangement." Adrian did not look away from me. "He will not be raising your rent again." I hated the way my pulse reacted to that. Not because it sounded romantic. It did not. It sounded decisive, permanent, like a lock clicking into place. I set my coffee on the hood of a parked car before I crushed it by accident. You do not get to make decisions about my life because I treated a patient. You treated a stranger after midnight with no security, no assistant, and a front door that barely locks, he said. His tone never rose, but somehow it still cut through the street noise around us. That was not a decision. That was a risk. It was my job, and now it is my concern. The words landed heavier than they should have. Behind him, one of the men in suits opened the clinic door wider as if this conversation had already been settled, and all that remained was for me to catch up. I folded my arms, partly because I was cold, mostly because I needed something between us. You cannot buy your way into my world. Adrian's expression shifted by half an inch. Not amusement exactly. Recognition, maybe. Like he had expected the fight and respected it more than gratitude. Claire, I am not trying to enter your world, he said. I am making sure no one else does. That should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it made the back of my neck prickle. My mind flashed to last night, to the way he had paused before leaving, one hand on the doorframe, eyes scanning the dark street beyond my clinic windows like he was measuring distances I could not see, to the black SUV that had rolled slowly past 10 minutes later while I was bleaching instruments, to the feeling I had pushed aside because I was too exhausted to name it. What exactly followed you to my clinic last night? I asked quietly. Adrian did not answer right away. The city moved around us. A bus sighed to a stop at the corner. Someone walked past with an umbrella tucked under one arm and glanced at the suited men before deciding very quickly to keep walking. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice until I had to lean in to hear him. That is why I am here. I held his gaze, refusing to let the chill climbing my spine show on my face. No, I said. That is not an answer. It is the only one you need this morning. Then he reached past me, opened the clinic door himself, and looked inside like he was taking inventory of every cracked tile, every dented cabinet, every place I had held together with second-hand equipment and stubbornness. When he looked back at me, his expression had gone quieter, something almost human moving beneath all that control. You saved my life in a room this city forgot, he said. I am not going to let the city forget it again. The clinic smelled like fresh paint, bleach, and money by noon. I hated that I could tell the difference. Men with tool belts moved through the hallway replacing light fixtures that had flickered for so long I had stopped noticing them. Two women in navy blazers were in the waiting room measuring windows for new blinds, speaking in low, efficient voices while my patients sat with clipboards in their laps looking around like they had walked into the wrong address. I kept smiling, kept taking blood pressure, kept listening to lungs and sore throats, and one anxious mother whose 7-year-old had been coughing for 3 days. But the whole time, I felt Adrian Moretti like a shadow stretched across every room. He was not inside the clinic. That almost made it worse. His presence was in the security camera above the front desk, in the locksmith changing the back door deadbolt, in the refrigerated unit that arrived at 11:30 with a handwritten invoice that said paid in full. By lunchtime, I had counted 11 changes, and no one had asked me permission for a single one. Dr. Bennett? Mrs. Alvarez asked from exam room 2. Her little grandson balanced on her hip despite my insistence that she sit down. Is somebody important buying the place? I pressed the stethoscope to the boy's back and forced my voice steady. No one is buying the clinic. Not that part, anyway. She gave me the look older women save for younger women who clearly do not understand the story they are standing in. She said softly. Well, whoever he is, he has expensive shoes. That nearly made me laugh, which felt dangerous. After she left, I found Lena at the front desk with her mouth hanging open over a stack of newly delivered supply catalogs. Lena had worked with me for 3 years, part-time when her college schedule allowed, and full-time whenever I was one panic attack away from collapse. She had seen me handle a power outage, a burst pipe, and a diabetic emergency all in the same week without crying. Today she looked genuinely impressed. Claire, she whispered, waving one glossy page at me. This equipment is not from a discount medical wholesaler. Do not touch anything that arrives without my approval. She lowered the catalog. That is not what I asked. I should have ignored her. Instead, I glanced through the front window and saw the black SUV still parked across the street. Same tinted windows. Same impossible stillness. He was a patient, I said. Lena's eyebrows shot up. You stitched up a man and he bought the building? When she said it out loud, it sounded completely insane. He overreacted. That is not what overreacting looks like. That is what rich men in old movies do before the orchestra music gets dramatic. Lena. She held up both hands, grinning, but the smile faded when she saw my face. You are actually scared. I looked away because that was the problem. I was not exactly scared. Fear was simpler. This was sharper than fear. This was the feeling of a line being crossed so quietly you only noticed when the room around you was no longer yours. At 2:15, the front door opened, and the waiting room went still in that strange human way places do when someone powerful enters without raising his voice. Adrian walked in alone this time. No coat, no umbrella, just a dark charcoal suit, and that same unreadable calm that made every ordinary object around him look temporary. He nodded once at Lena, once at the room, then his eyes found me at the end of the hall. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped out of exam room 3 and pulled the door mostly shut behind me. "You do not get to walk in here like this." His gaze moved briefly to the patient charts tucked under my arm, to the exhaustion I knew was written all over my face. "You have had 12 patients since 8 this morning," he said. "You skipped lunch. Your blood sugar is probably low, and your left hand is shaking because you had too much coffee instead of breakfast." I stared at him. "Have you been watching me all day?" "Yes." He said it so plainly my breath caught. No apology. No embarrassment. Just truth, stripped clean. "That is not normal," I whispered. "Neither was last night." His voice dropped, quiet enough that only I could hear it. "Claire, the men who were looking for me now know where I was treated. I can either pretend that does not matter, or I can protect the one person who did not leave me bleeding in the dark. I do not pretend well." For the first time that day, I did not have a clever response. I just looked at him and felt the truth of those words settle somewhere uncomfortable beneath my ribs. The men who had been looking for him knew where he had been treated. They knew about my clinic. Maybe they knew about me. The waiting room behind us hummed with ordinary life, a toddler crying because he wanted a sticker, the printer spitting out intake forms, Lena explaining insurance to someone in her patient customer service voice. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. And Adrian stood in the middle of all of it like a storm dressed in Italian wool, calmly informing me that my life had shifted on its axis while I was busy checking fevers and refilling inhalers. "You do not get to decide what protection looks like for me," I said. My voice came out lower than I expected, tired and steady and a little frayed around the edges. Adrian did not flinch. "No," he said, "but I do get to decide what happens to the threats I can see." That is exactly the problem. He studied me for a long second, his gaze moving over my face in a way that was not personal so much as precise, like he was taking inventory of what the morning had cost me. "You think this is about control," he said. "It is about exposure. You bought a building before breakfast." "Yes." "You stationed men outside my front door." "Yes." "You have apparently monitored my coffee intake." A faint change touched his expression then, not quite a smile, but close enough to be dangerous. "You had 3 cups by 10:30. The last one was from the card on the corner because the lid leaves a stain on the side of the cup. I should not have noticed how absurdly specific that was. I definitely should not have noticed the flicker of warmth it stirred before common sense came running back in. "That is not reassuring," I said. "It is not meant to be." He glanced toward exam room 3 when a child started coughing behind the door, then back to me. "I need 5 minutes. You are currently on minute 90. Claire." The way he said my name made the hallway feel narrower somehow. Not softer, just more focused. Like the rest of the world had blurred around the edges, and he expected me to stand still in the center of it. I hated that part of me wanted to. I exhaled, shoved the chart into Lena's hands when she appeared at the front desk, and pointed toward my office. It was barely an office, really. More like a storage closet with a desk wedged between a filing cabinet and a bookshelf that leaned half an inch to the left. The coffee maker had been broken since February. The blinds had not fully closed in 6 months. Adrian stepped inside and looked around once, taking in every cramped square foot. "Do not say a word about the walls," I warned. I was going to say this room should have a lock. It does. A better one. I shut the door harder than necessary and turned to face him. In the small space, his presence felt even larger. The fluorescent light caught the silver at his wristwatch, the clean line of his collar, the faint shadow of fatigue under his eyes that probably no one but me would have noticed. He looked perfectly put together until you knew where to look. "Start talking," I said. Adrian remained standing while I dropped into my chair because suddenly I was too tired to perform anger at full volume. "A shipment went wrong last night," he said. "Someone made a move they should not have made. I left before the police or anyone else could ask questions I had no intention of answering. I needed medical attention. Your clinic was the nearest place with the lights still on. And the people looking for you? They are not random. His tone stayed even, but the room felt colder anyway. They watch patterns. Cars. Buildings. Weak points. If they trace my movements, this address becomes a point of interest. I pressed my palms flat against the desk. You could have just told me that this morning. Would you have listened? I opened my mouth and stopped. Because honestly, probably not. Not at first. I would have heard threat and money and overreach. I would have assumed he was exaggerating to justify stepping into my life like a man who had never once been told no and meant it. Adrian saw the answer on my face and gave the smallest nod. Exactly. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket then, slow enough not to startle me, and set a slim black phone on my desk. New. Unopened. Direct line, he said. It connects only to me and one security lead I trust. I stared at the phone, then at him. I am not taking a Mafia emergency phone. It is not for me. His voice softened just enough to make the next words land harder. It is for the moment you realize I was right. For the rest of the afternoon, the black phone sat on my desk like a threat dressed up as a favor. I did not touch it. I did not open it. I shoved it behind a stack of patient files and told myself that if I could not see it, maybe I could pretend the man who had placed it there had not quietly rearranged the edges of my life in less than 12 hours. That strategy worked for almost 20 minutes. Then Lena knocked once on my office door and stepped in holding a cardboard tray with 2 salads from the deli across the street. She set one in front of me without asking. Eat, she said. You are starting to look philosophical, and that is always bad for productivity. I glanced at the clock. 3:42. I am working. You are spiraling in a rolling chair. She dropped into the seat across from my desk and folded her arms. Also, there are 2 men outside who look like they would take a bullet for the sidewalk, and Mrs. Alvarez just told everyone in the waiting room that you have a mysterious admirer with excellent posture. I closed my eyes for one full second. He is not an admirer. That is not how mysterious men in expensive suits buy real estate, Claire. Lena. Fine, she said, opening her salad. Then he is a terrifying nonprofit. Initiative. I should have laughed. Part of me wanted to. The other part was too tired. I picked up my fork and forced down a bite that tasted mostly like stress. He says people may come looking for him. Lena stopped chewing. For him here. Yes. And you believe him? I thought about Adrian in my office, standing too still, speaking too calmly, as if danger was not a possibility, but a logistical issue already being managed. I thought about the slow-moving car from the night before, the way his eyes had checked every window before he left, the way he had noticed my shaking hand, my skipped lunch, my coffee habits, like observation was as natural to him as breathing. I believe he believes it, I said. Lena set her plastic fork down carefully. That is not comforting. I know. We ate in silence for a minute, the clinic noises filtering through the thin wall. A ringing phone. A child laughing. The low hum of the new refrigerator unit in the hallway. So many sounds of ordinary life. It made the fear feel almost impolite, like I was bringing drama into rooms that had no space for it. At 4:10, the front desk buzzer sounded twice in quick succession. Lena stood automatically. I will get it. Wait. Something in me tightened without warning. Not a thought. A sensation. The same cold thread that had slid down my spine the night before when headlights crawled past the clinic windows. Lena saw it on my face and went still. What? She whispered. I do not know. That was the worst part. If I had known, maybe I could have named it, measured it. But all I had was instinct, that old animal part of the body that notices before the mind catches up. The buzzer sounded again, this time harder. I pushed back from the desk and stood. Stay here. Absolutely not. We stepped into the hallway together. The waiting room was nearly empty now, just one elderly man flipping through a year-old sports magazine and a mother wrestling her sleeping toddler into a coat. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could make out a silhouette. Broad shoulders. A baseball cap pulled low. One hand braced against the frame. One of the security men approached from outside, spoke to whoever it was, then glanced sharply toward the street. Not toward the door. Toward the street. The second guard turned too. Their posture changed all at once. Not panic. Readiness. Controlled and immediate. My heart gave one hard, painful thud. The door opened a crack, and one of Adrian's men stepped inside. "Ms. Bennett," he said, voice clipped and low. "I need everyone away from the windows. Right now." The mother froze. The old man lowered his magazine. Lena's fingers wrapped around my wrist. "Claire," she whispered. But I was already moving, not toward safety, not at first, but toward the front because fear has never been the thing that stops me. It just sharpens the room. Through the narrow slice of glass beside the door, I caught a glimpse of a gray sedan idling across the street. Engine running. Two figures inside watching the clinic like they had nowhere else to be. Then my new security detail blocked the view, and one of them reached for the lock. In that exact moment, buried beneath intake forms and insurance claims on my desk, the black phone Adrian had left for me began to ring. The sound of that phone cut through me sharper than the buzzer had. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise. A clean digital ring from inside my office, like someone had reached through the chaos and tapped me on the shoulder. He was right. That was my first thought, stupid and immediate and deeply irritating. Adrian had known this moment was coming closely enough to leave me aligned to him before I even understood I might need one. One of the security men moved in front of the door, his body blocking the narrow glass panel. "Ms. Bennett," he said again, calmer this time, like if he kept his voice level the room might stay level too. "Please move your patients to the interior hall." The mother with the toddler did not argue. Fear has a language people understand even when no one speaks it out loud. She scooped her daughter higher against her shoulder and hurried where I pointed. The older man folded his sports magazine with trembling care, like paper routine might help hold the world together. Lena stayed next to me, her fingers still wrapped around my wrist, cool and tight. "Go answer it," she whispered. I looked at her. "You heard that too?" "Claire, half the room heard your Mafia." Phone ringing from under a pile of paperwork. This is not subtle anymore. She was trying for humor. It almost worked. I pulled free gently and moved fast, not running exactly, but with the kind of speed you only use when you are trying not to scare other people by how scared you are. My office suddenly felt much smaller than it had 20 minutes earlier. The black phone was vibrating against the wood of my desk, inching itself closer to a stack of charts with each ring. I grabbed it on the fourth. "What?" Adrian's voice came through low and clear, with no greeting, no wasted breath. "Are you away from the windows?" I turned automatically, even though my office blinds were half shut and useless. "My patients are being moved." "Claire." That one word held enough steel to stop me. "Answer the question." "Yes," I said. "Now I am." A pause. Not long. Just long enough for me to hear something in the background on his end. An engine, maybe. Voices kept low. The muted world of men who moved quickly without sounding rushed. "Good," he said. "Listen carefully. A gray sedan is across the street. Do not go near the front. Do not leave through the back unless one of my men tells you to." I leaned one hand on the desk because my knees had suddenly remembered they were attached to me. "Who are they?" "Confirmation, most likely." "Confirmation of what?" "Of you." That landed harder than anything else had. Not the building, not the security, not even the phone. Of you. As if I had become a fact someone needed verified. My throat felt dry. "I am a doctor in a neighborhood clinic. You are the woman who treated me when she should have turned me away." His voice stayed controlled, but something warmer moved under it now. Not softness exactly. Focus. That makes you relevant. From the hallway, I could hear Lena directing patients deeper into the building, her voice brisk and bright in the way people use when they are holding panic by the throat. I lowered mine. "Tell me the truth for once. Is this because of me or because of you?" Adrian did not answer immediately. When he spoke, the words were measured. "Both." I closed my eyes. It would have been easier if he had lied. Easier if he had said not to worry, that it was routine, that rich, dangerous men always inspired a little surveillance, and I had just gotten unlucky. Instead, he gave me the truth, and the truth was heavier. "I should call the police," I said. "You can." Another pause. "But by the time they arrive, the car may be gone, and whoever sent it will know how quickly your clinic responds under pressure." You talk about people like weather systems. No, weather is less predictable. I hated that answer because it was the kind that stayed with you. Through the wall, I heard the front door open, then shut again, followed by the low murmur of one of his men speaking into a radio. Adrian's voice sharpened a fraction. "Claire, I need you to do exactly what I say for the next 10 minutes. You keep saying that like I know how." You know how to save lives under pressure. This is no different. My laugh came out thin. That is a very generous definition of medicine. Stay in your office, he said. Keep the door closed. Keep Lena with you if she is there. I am 6 minutes away. That should not have mattered. 6 minutes. A ridiculous thing for my pulse to notice. A ridiculous thing for my breathing to steady around. But it did. Maybe because the whole day had felt like being acted upon by forces too large and too strange to name. And now, for the first time since the phone rang, I had something measurable. 6 minutes. Outside, a car horn sounded once, abrupt and impatient. Then silence. I moved to the office door and locked it, the cheap little click suddenly sounding smaller than ever. Adrian, I said, my voice lower now, quieter in a way that felt more dangerous than fear. If they come inside before you get here, they will not, he said. Absolute. Immediate. And before I could ask how he could possibly promise that, something heavy struck the clinic's front door hard enough to rattle the frame. The impact against the front door shook the cheap lock on my office hard enough to make the metal chatter. Lena flinched beside me, one hand flying to her mouth, and somewhere in the hall a child started crying. Adrian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Stay where you are, he said. Into my ear, every word precise, controlled, impossible to argue with. Beyond my office door, I could hear movement now. Fast feet, low voices, the sound of people trying very hard not to sound alarmed. Then one of Adrian's men spoke sharply from the front, not shouting, but with the kind of authority that makes a room obey before it understands why. Another heavy hit landed against the door, followed by a scrape, like someone outside had changed their mind and backed away. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. What is happening? I whispered. They are testing distance, Adrian said. Timing. Response. You say that like it is normal. For me, it is. That should have chilled me more than it did. Instead, what I felt was stranger. Not comfort. Nothing about Adrian Moretti was comforting. But there was something in the steadiness of his voice that gave my fear edges. Shape. A way to hold it. Lena grabbed my forearm. Please tell me he is almost here. I did not realize I had put the phone on speaker until she said it. Adrian answered her directly. 3 minutes. She blinked. That is not enough time. It is for me. I should not have noticed the effect those words had on the room inside me. I definitely should not have let them settle there. But outside the office, more sounds were stacking up now. A lock engaging. One of the mothers murmuring to her child. The distinct click of the new back door being opened, then closed again. Controlled movement. Organized. Adrian's people were not panicking. That mattered. I did not know why it mattered, but it did. I moved to the narrow gap in the blinds before I could stop myself and angled my head just enough to catch a piece of the street. The gray sedan was still there, parked half a block down now, engine running. One of the men inside turned his head toward the clinic at the exact same moment a black SUV cut across the intersection too fast, stopped at the curb, and sent rainwater splashing up from the gutter. Adrian's car. I knew it before he stepped out. The sedan pulled away almost instantly, like it had seen what it came to see and wanted no part of what arrived next. The office door opened so. Suddenly I gasped, but it was only one of the security men, his jacket damp at the shoulders, his face calm and alert. Ms. Bennett, he said, Mr. Moretti is here. We are moving the last patient out the rear hall now. You and your assistant stay with me. Adrian's voice came back through the phone, closer now somehow even before I saw him. Open the door, Claire. I unlocked it with hands that were trying very hard to shake. The hallway outside looked both exactly the same and completely different. Same faded floor tiles. Same bulletin board with flu-shot flyers curling at the corners. But now there were people placed at every angle with quiet purpose. And in the center of all of it stood Adrian, coat open, rain caught in the dark edges of his hair, one hand braced on the wall, as if he had reached me faster than his side wanted to allow. His eyes found mine immediately. Everything else in the corridor seemed to blur at the edges. He crossed the distance between us in 6 strides, stopped close, and looked me over once from face to hands to shoes, checking for damage I did not have. When he spoke, his voice had dropped into something lower, rougher, and for the first time since I met him, not entirely under control. Are you hurt? I shook my head. It should have been enough. It was not. He stepped closer, one hand lifting halfway toward my arm before he stopped himself and let it fall. Restraint. That was the thing about him people probably missed if they only looked at the suits and the silence and the men who moved when he moved. Adrian Moretti carried power like it was second nature. But what made him dangerous was how hard he could hold it back. "They are gone," he said. "I still on mine. For now." Lena exhaled so hard it almost sounded like a laugh. "That is your comforting version?" Adrian did not even look away from me when he answered. No, the clinic behind us was nearly empty now. Patients ushered out through the back with apologies and rescheduled appointments. Somewhere near the front desk, a radio murmured. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Ordinary sounds. Fragile sounds. Adrian finally glanced toward the front entrance, then back to me. "This ends today," he said. Quietly. "What does that mean?" His gaze sharpened, and I saw it then. The decision already made, already moving, already bigger than this hallway, and my little clinic and the neighborhood I had spent 4 years trying to hold together with grant money and cheap coffee and pure stubbornness. "It means," he said, "they do not get to use your name to send me a message." For one suspended second, nobody moved. Adrian's words seemed to settle into the walls, into the new locks and cameras and fresh paint, into every inch of the clinic he had claimed was still mine, while making it impossible for me to forget his presence in it. Then he turned away from me and spoke quietly to the man at his left. No raised voice, no dramatic orders, just a few low instructions that made everyone around him shift with immediate purpose. One guard headed for the front. Another moved toward the rear hall. Lena stood beside me looking pale and furious in equal measure. "I really hate how normal this seems to him," she muttered. I should have agreed. Instead, I was watching Adrian brace one hand briefly against the wall again. So slight, I might have missed it if I had not been the one who stitched him up the night before. He had gotten here fast. Too fast for someone who was supposed to be resting. "You should not be standing," I said before I could stop myself. His head turned back toward me, and something unreadable passed through his expression. "That is what you say after this." "It is what I would say to any patient who ignored my instructions." Lena looked between us like she had just discovered an entirely different genre of problem inside the first one. Adrian actually exhaled a faint breath that almost sounded like amusement. "I did not ignore them," he said. "I prioritized." That is just a better-dressed word for ignoring. For the first time all day, the corner of his mouth moved. Tiny. Gone in a second. But I saw it. And seeing it felt strange, like finding sunlight in a room that had only ever known fluorescent bulbs. He turned serious again almost immediately. "The clinic closes early today." "No, Claire." I said no. My voice came out sharper than I expected, sharpened by exhaustion and adrenaline and the simple stubborn fact that this place mattered before he arrived with his tailored coats, an impossible certainty. Children still need prescriptions. Mrs. Alvarez needs her blood pressure checked again next week because she lies about her sodium intake. Mr. Kessler in apartment 4B will ignore his chest congestion until it becomes an emergency if I do not call him tonight. This clinic does not become collateral damage because powerful men have decided to stare at each other through windshields. Adrian listened without interrupting. That was the dangerous thing about him. He listened like a man gathering facts, not just words. When I finished, he took one step closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "And that," he said, "is exactly why I bought this building before someone else decided it was easier to erase your work than challenge mine." The air left me slowly. Because there it was again, beneath the control and the surveillance and the infuriating way he moved resources like chess pieces. Not vanity, not impulse. Protection, yes, but not only of me. Of the clinic. Of what it meant. He had seen the cracked walls and outdated equipment and still somehow understood what people in this neighborhood already knew. This little place mattered. "You do not get to decide what survives here," I whispered. "No," he said. "But I can make survival more expensive for anyone who tries." A woman from the front desk hurried down the hall then. One of the temporary staff his people had somehow produced out of nowhere, tablet clutched to her chest. "Mr. Moretti," she said quietly. The police drove by and did not stop. "The sedan is gone." Adrian nodded once. "Good." Then he looked at me again, and all the steel in him softened into something quieter, something that hit harder because it was not meant for the room. Only for me. "You asked me this morning if I was buying my way into your world," he said. "I am not. I am building walls around the part of it worth protecting." And I hated how much that landed, hated how my pulse reacted, Hated most of all that for the first time since he stepped into my clinic bleeding and impossible, I was no longer completely sure I wanted him gone. By 6:30 that evening, the clinic had gone quiet in a way I had never trusted. Not peaceful, just paused, like the whole building was listening for something it could not name. Lena had finally gone home after making me promise twice that I would lock my office and 3 times that I would not act brave just because a man in an expensive coat had decided bravery was one of my defining personality flaws. The temporary staff Adrian's people had placed downstairs moved with soft efficiency, cleaning up the day as if chaos were just another kind of paperwork. Fresh bulbs glowed overhead where old ones had buzzed. The new cameras blinked red above the entrance. Someone had replaced the broken brass plate on my office door. Bennett Community Clinic. Same name. Better metal. I stood alone in exam room, 2 finishing notes with the door half open, my stethoscope still around my neck, when I heard the front door open and close once. Not hurried. Not uncertain. I looked up before the footsteps reached the hallway because somehow I already knew. Adrian appeared at the end of the corridor without his coat this time. Dark sleeves rolled back one turn, the line of white bandaging visible for half a second at his side before the fabric shifted again. He had changed nothing and somehow looked more dangerous for it. Less polished, more real. "You are still here," he said. "So are you," I replied. He stopped outside the room and glanced at the chart in my hand. "You should go home." That sounds familiar. This time it is medical advice. I almost smiled. Almost. He noticed anyway. I could tell by the way his eyes changed, the way all that cold precision eased for one dangerous heartbeat. "How is your side?" I asked. "Manageable. That is not a measurement. It is the one you are getting." He stepped into the room then, and the air shifted around him the way it always did, like space itself made room. But there was something quieter in him tonight. The edge was still there. The watchfulness. The sense that his attention never fully rested. Yet underneath it, I saw the fatigue he had been outrunning since last night. "Your people said the sedan did not come back," I said. "No, in the building." His gaze moved briefly across the room, taking in the stocked cabinets, the repaired light panel, the sealed box of upgraded monitors waiting against the wall. "The building stays." "Adrian." "Claire." He said my name like it belonged in his mouth, steady and low and far too certain. I meant what I said. Your clinic remains yours. Your patients remain yours. Your choices remain yours. But the walls are yours. He held my gaze. Yes. The honesty of it settled between us, too solid to ignore. Outside, rain began again, soft against the windows, a hush instead of a warning this time. I set the chart down slowly because my hands had started to feel too aware of themselves. "You do realize this is not normal. I have never claimed to be normal." "No," I said softly. "You just keep proving it." That faint almost smile returned, gone before it fully formed. Then his expression changed, grew more serious, more open than I had seen it all day. "Last night," he said, "you looked at a wounded stranger and chose to help him before you knew his name, his money, or the trouble attached to him. Most people calculate first. You did not." I swallowed. "I am a doctor. You are more than that." The room felt suddenly smaller, not from fear this time, but from the dangerous closeness of being seen too clearly by someone I should not have let matter. Adrian took one slow step nearer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to make the truth between us impossible to pretend away. "I do not own you, Claire," he said quietly, "but I will own every door, every lock, and every wall between you and anyone who thinks your kindness makes you easy to reach."